Welcome to the Retail is Detail podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Hamer. This is where we go beyond the headlines and get into how great retailers and tech innovators really think, from trading to teams to business building to tech, loyalty, and data. Every Monday afternoon, I talk to the people building, running, and reinventing retail, unpacking what's working, what's changing, and what's next. If you care about the detail of retail, you're in the right place. I am joined by Murray Van Wyck, a data scientist and founder of Data Simply, which has helped retailers from Sainsbury's to Ganni unlock hundreds of millions of revenue. Murray's career spans building AI-driven personalization engines, scaling data science teams, and turning overwhelming data into clear, actionable strategies that drive growth. Welcome, Murray.
Hey, thanks for having me on. It's great to be here.
Pleasure. Murray, you've been behind the scenes helping retailers lock hundreds of millions of value. When you think back across your career, what's that one moment where you thought, wow, this is why I do what I do?
I think it was early on when I was actually considering quitting. When I first got into like retail analytics, a lot of it seemed really simple. So, coming from a background where you have like predictive modeling and there's lots of things you could do. I found in the beginning I was doing a lot of retail analytics, and a lot of it was just like ratios and averages and looking at it from different angles. And I said, nobody could find this valuable. Like two numbers divided by each other? No, like it'll never happen. And I remember at that point, I was in London, I was looking around thinking, okay, I'm just going to switch careers. And then it's one of those fateful moments. There was a woman who I had been doing insights for Sainsbury's, and she wrote me the most thankful email, like, thank you for sending me this stuff. I had no idea about my customers or what they were doing. And now I have a clear picture of what's going on, and explained everything I was seeing with my sales. And I know what to do with my category now. And, it was that moment you realize, oh, okay, like a lot of the people behind the scenes, like at a Sainsbury's, they see ketchup bottles, they see the price of the ketchup bottle, they see what the competitors are doing, but they don't really have that much insight into what their customers are doing or why. And even though the numbers are kind of simple, just seeing like customers are visiting more or less, or what else they're buying at the same time, or the journey that they may go on through categories, starting off trialing this, adding that. It really, if you're in the business, if you're in the dark, it really illuminates things for them. And so I think it was that kind of people impact that really made the big difference for me. It provided a lot more purpose to what I was doing. And also kind of helped me with not worrying about overcomplicating things. You don't need a lot of complexity to drive value.
So sometimes even really simple ratios that retailers hadn't thought of can be game changers.
Oh, yeah. If it provides you a different perspective on your business that helps you solve a problem or unblock something that was stopping your growth, that's tremendous. And if it's a predictive model, great. If it's a ratio that you weren't looking at, that's great too. It's whatever helps you solve that problem and get clarity. Yeah.
Well, we'll come on to what specific ratios retailers should be looking at shortly. But you founded Data Simply in 2023. Big step. What was the spark or frustration that pushed you to create a business rather than being a consultant?
I think it's the impact. So I did consulting for about 6.5 years with one retailer in particular, and I worked for a consultancy prior to that. And it can feel like a treadmill at some points. You keep going, through the motions. I found that I was getting better at negotiating bureaucracy than really improving what I was doing. And one of the kind of big blocks of that was that I was just purely selling my time. And that was my biggest concern,
Right.
Will you have another contract when this one ends? And really, I wanted to move beyond that because I knew that's the only way I could really scale my impact.
Cool. So moving to multiplying your value rather than just selling your time for money.
Yeah, essentially. I really like retail for a variety of reasons, and I find it really interesting. And having spoken to so many retailers, there's so many people on different stages of the journey, and there's just so much opportunity, I think, to kind of take best practices from some people and bring them other places, and really kind of help even out where businesses are successful. I don't know if you found similar issues or situations.
We are working with an increasing number of enterprise retailers now, and problems are definitely the same, but tinted with more urgency for smaller retailers that are looking to survive in categories. So they might not have the same luxury of looking so far ahead and the same quality of data, which I guess we'll come on to.
Yeah, no, definitely. Big companies, it's helps them and it hurts them a bit, the momentum. So the momentum allows them to take a step back and really look at what they're doing and try and do that best practice. But you can see there's loads of people who just get very comfortable with
Mm.
the idea that this business is going to be around here for, it was here for 100 years, it's going to be around for 100 more. And then you can find loads of examples of businesses that went under, regardless of how old they are. Yeah.
Also, in terms of the metrics which buyers are given in large organizations, quite short-termist. I remember my Procter and Gamble days. It was all about how much money they could get out of suppliers at the last minute to hit their targets. So you get what you're incentivizing, right?
Yeah, well, it's really funny. I was building recommendation engines, and I just assumed that everybody cares about the customer. I remember talking to one category manager, and I said, "This is great. Now we can show customers like what they want and their email communications, and they'll be you build long-term value." And he looks at me, he says, "I don't care what customers want. I need to sell 1 million pounds of Kellogg's cornflakes by the end of the quarter, or I don't hit my P&L." And I was just like, "Oh, that's how it works."
Mm.
It explains a lot. Yeah.
I hope the customers want Kellogg's cornflakes in that case. You've worked with huge retailers and ambitious scale ups. So, what's the biggest difference you've seen in how those two groups approach data and their data's role in growth?
Well, the obvious one is that big retailers, lots of process, can get lots of specialized roles, and it can get really bureaucratic and away from where the actual value is.
Mm.
Small retailers, almost no data, not quality doesn't really matter. Just show me something. So that's a bit stereotypical, but I think you'll find data-driven people in both organizations. I think the big difference, though, is that smaller retailers are often focused on like low-hanging fruit, like what's something I can do to get real impact right now, even if it's simpler.
Mm.
The bigger retailers are often they're kind of weighted to more what's something more sophisticated. And I think that's you have a balance of things driving that. One is you want to look good in front of your boss, and if you say you're just doing this really simple thing, that doesn't necessarily drive it. But the other is that I think there's expectations on you to do things that aren't necessarily simple. I often think that retailers' biggest issues, like the bigger ones, is that they need to do less better.
Hmm.
It's very easy for retailers to add and add and add.
Mm.
And at the end, they're micro optimizing, but and adding loads of complexity to processes, just loads and loads.
Some cases there may just be a simple button you can keep pushing to drive customer satisfaction and sales, and retailers are moving away from just pushing that button.
Yeah, well, in some cases, like I saw one organization, the CRM team was incentivized on the number of emails they sent, regardless of whether those emails were opened. A very
Wow.
simple fix is to not do that. But we were talking about churn models and everything else, and it's just like nobody wanted to talk about models to predict whether the content was relevant and people would open them. Yeah, their numbers weren't there. But I think on the other side, the smaller retailers can oversimplify things, and sometimes you need a bit of complexity just to get things done, or to beat out your competitor who's willing to kind of invest. Uh,
When you think about that, are you thinking about a specific example of oversimplification in small retail?
it's usually I'll double my ads. I'll just keep doubling my ad spend, and it's like, well, you're not really building retention there, and ad spend always plateaus and everything. Like if it's working for you, great, but at a certain point, it will stop working, or you're investing huge amounts of money, like relative to the size of the business,
Mm.
and then what are you going to do next? And it's kind of like, okay, well, maybe I should invest even a little bit on retention. I find a lot of retailers, big and small, are acquisition obsessed, and it's not one or the other. It's a question of how much are you investing in one or the other. And maybe, yeah, it's 90, 95% acquisition, but are you laying the foundation for retention? Are you collecting emails? Are you doing something to keep it active so you still have the kind of rights to keep sending to them? I talked to one retailer, they had a huge list, but they hadn't emailed anybody. And it turned out most of those emails were like 2, 3 years old. in theory, it's not good practice to email people you don't have any kind of relationship or contact with in that time period. You can run into GDPR issues and all that kind of fun stuff. But
Yeah.
yeah, it depends on the retailer. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what are some of the smartest ways you've seen retailers invest in retention rather than acquisition?
That's a good question. Often I find that retailers don't necessarily invest in it, but I think it's thinking more holistically. Often when I say retention, people think email marketing,
Mm,
and retention can be a great experience. It can be taking back a product even when your T's and C's don't necessarily say you have to. And some of these kinds of investments, I think it's when people really think about it holistically, rather than a marketing channel, has been the most interesting things. I can't say that I've seen these holistic strategies backed up by here's a raw figure that it got me 20% extra sales and everything. But it's very interesting to think to speak to people who are in loyalty, particular, and
yeah.
think more broadly about what it means to keep a customer loyal and shopping with your brand. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
we've definitely seen that strong correlation between small businesses just not being either able or willing to think about, what happens when that customer comes back to you next year if they do.
I dealt with one brand that was actually they're fairly large. Like they're in at least a dozen cities around the world. One question I love is, what is the value to your business if you increase retention by 10%? If all, out of 100 customers leave, what if you're able to get one extra order from 10% of them?
Wow.
I call it the iceberg chart, because if you do that over time, you see that the lost sales ends up dwarfing your current sales. I had about 10 years of data. I was able to show that a 10% increase in retention rate, again, one order would net them, they would be 3 times the size they are today. It's huge. A lot of people don't look at it like that, unfortunately.
Mm,
Yeah.
awesome. So easy to sell to your current customers, do more of it.
I wish I had some unique piece of marketing wisdom for you, but often it's just common sense applied well,
Mm,
that really seems to work.
awesome.
Uh,
Throughout your career, has there been an unexpected consumer insight about consumer behavior that's really stuck with you?
how people can change their behavior based on smaller things, I guess. One of the recommendations engines I built, it is looking at sales of a bunch of different products, but champagne in particular. And I found that champagne was really niche, and so it really rarely recommend it. But the thing it didn't take into account is that there's a certain threshold that once you discount champagne enough, everybody buys champagne. If you drink
All right.
alcohol, you buy champagne. And it just could not pick up on that. And I realized that there's these tipping points. And somebody says, like, that's cheap and I want it. And there could be 100 reasons why people will buy champagne, from treating themselves. I really thought deeply about this. And then really, it's just your good old price elasticity curves. And
Yep.
sometimes they have bigger tips than you would expect.
Well, what
Yeah.
price will almost everyone buy champagne?
Yeah, that's the question I asked myself.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I had to sell a lot more products than champagne, but so I never got a good answer to that. But I feel like I could probably spend a couple of years just trying to examine the tipping point.
So you position Data Simply as offering fractional data scientists. What does that look like in practice for a retailer?
Well, we're in the middle of changing this because I had an initial hypothesis, and it turned out to not be great. But a lot of it is really traditional kind of consultancy. And what I thought was data science consultants often are pretty expensive, and the need for them really goes up and down. And the
Mm,
idea being that if you could spread our data scientists around a couple of organizations, you could get all the benefit of a data scientist or more, and you could pay a lot less. But the problem I found was that, uh, again, there's a tipping point in terms of business sizes, and smaller businesses often didn't either want or need a data scientist. They either weren't there in their journey. They had somebody else, like a marketer, who knew enough to be able to do just a little bit. AI came in somewhere and really took force as well. Or you're a big business, in which case you're serving somebody with a specialized role, and they were perfectly happy to pay a bit extra to have you available full time. So one of the other big changes was that, as part of that original strategy, I started producing a code library of all the stuff that I'd done because there's certain types of analysis that I've rewritten for like 5 different retailers. Like I got tired of writing it again, and so
Mm.
I thought, okay, I'll just start putting this together for my own purposes. I ended up open sourcing it. It's a package. It's a Python package called Retail Science. But basically, what it does is it gives retailers like of any size really access to the same kinds of things that big retailers pay in some cases millions of dollars, pounds, euros a year for. And one of the consultancy I worked for, they actually had a whole analytics platform. And this package is now doing what most of what it was doing then. So it's trying to remove the barriers to doing really great insights for retailers. So if you're a smaller retailer and maybe or mid-size, you have 1 or 2 people in a data team, like they can now run the same kinds of analysis that you would have to pay a lot of money for to get it as a platform or to get a consultant to do. And I use it pretty much every day as well for the work I do because it's a huge productivity improver. I don't have to
Nice.
rewrite the same thing again. And also, there's all kinds of tests to make sure the code works because when you implement something 5 times, it's easy to make a mistake here or there, and then you find it, you fix it. I have it running with several retailers now. There's a very large UK pharmacy, a chemist chain that are using it to try and convert some of their old reporting. So it's been a lot of fun, actually.
Just for our listeners, that's p.ai, as in how you spell pi in this case?
Oh, PY.
Py. Okay,
So as
cool.
in Python.
Ah,
If you're on the nerdier side of the spectrum, it makes a lot of sense. Everybody else, they have no idea how to say it. So the name might have to change. We'll have to see.
okay, cool, awesome. But why the decision to open source? How does that make commercial sense?
To a certain degree, it doesn't, which is why it does. So the industry is just filled with people with really deep relationships, and a lot of that time, that's how people get in. They worked with somebody. You're talking about how you work at P&G, and maybe
Yeah.
you met somebody at a retailer, and that person went up to be the high up in another retailer like Sainsbury's or somebody. And so it's very relationship driven. I found that by open source, you could get access to a lot of people that normally you would only be able to if you had really good relationships with.
Mhm.
And the way a lot of the industry works is that like you hire people based on the relationships or the user relationships to get in. I found it's been a huge door opener for me. I talked to a guy who he does media mix modeling. He has an open source package doing this. PyMC marketing, it's called. He said it's a leap of faith as well because
Mm.
your competitors will never do it because on the surface it makes no sense from a financial perspective. But if you're willing to take a leap of faith to get to the other side, you can end up with something that can open a lot of doors for you. And I made the decision about a year and a half ago that I would take this leap of faith. And so far, it's paid off. It's been great at getting like conversations started, at getting introductions. Like this retailer that I mentioned, this chemist chain, no way in a million years would, if I had said, this is a commercial product, I'm going to build a platform around it, it's going to be in the price range these things go for 100, 200, 500,000, a million a year. Like, no way I would have got in. But the fact that it's open source meant that they could take a look, they're not worried. They can see all the code. They can see how it works. And then it also ends up being, it makes me, adds credibility to myself. The fact that
Mm.
I could write it, that I can understand it, that I could explain it. So in that sense, it's been really good. But I do talk to people regularly who are, how are you not charging 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 a month for this? I think I also skew a bit towards the engineering side of things, so that ends up being the open source ideology is a little more established there than say on the
Nice.
commercial side. Yeah.
That's great. So, this lean forward, this ability for anyone to trial with you behind it has effectively worked as a form of demo or trial that is getting you indoors and your generosity is being reciprocated.
It's funny. Early on, I was also considering. I have a developer working on it and some kind of stuff that goes around it full time. Early on, I was considering. There was a LinkedIn. They write your posts for you. A
Hmm.
LinkedIn marketing agency, and I looked at how much they were charging, and I looked at how much a developer cost. I'm like, this agency is more expensive than the developer. And so I just started paying the developer, and it's been even better marketing. I think it's worked out fairly well for me so far. Uh,
You have a mission to transform 100,000 retailers in the next 10 years. So, for context, where I'm sitting in the UK, there'd be about a third of the retailers that are here.
yeah.
Why that number, and how's it going?
I've actually expanded it.
Oh,
I
nice.
well, um, the idea is now that I kind of figured that, well, with the package, I can hit a lot more people, but also it kind of hit me the other day, like, what am I going to do during retirement? What's just a crazy big mission? I worked with a woman who was in marketing, and she did envirotech or green tech or clean tech or whatever you want to call it. And she was working with a company that had a 100-year mission. And she
Mhm.
was like, how do you market a 100-year mission when most people won't be alive to see it succeed? And like, what does that mean for communication and everything? I was like, that sounds like a really fun challenge. I keep thinking one day I'm going to retire, but I keep talking to people who are on the verge of retirement. None of them want to retire. They're all they're C-suite people and everything, and they're like, well, I want to keep working. I just want to work a little less. And I thought maybe if I had a 50-year mission, I could keep working and make a really big difference. So I've kind of started rethinking of the 100,000 goal and just thinking, why not even bigger? And if it takes me 50 years, well, then I have something to do well into retirement. It's a wee bit crazy, I think. I don't know a lot about you during COVID, but I like a lot of people started baking bread because
Mhm.
I had a friend. His father retired. He baked bread. The bread was delicious. I just got fat. I just kept eating bread. This isn't the life for me in retirement. You know, I feel like I kind of need to be working. And if you really have this big mission, um, I think it keeps me going. And the other thing is, you look at like the success I've had with kind of Pi Retail Science. It's just starting, but I keep getting people are saying, "Could you do more stuff in loyalty?" Like there's cohort analysis in this package. It's like loyalty needs some other stuff. Can you do more stuff there? And I just thought this has the real ability, if I just keep open sourcing more and more, it has the real ability to change the way a lot of retailers work. And it's not going to happen in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, but I'm planning on being around for a while. So why not just make it a long-term goal?
The first guest I've had on the podcast with a 50-year vision. I love it. And how big is that vision? How many retailers?
Well, really, I would say all. Yeah, well, why not? But that's not realistic. I look back. I don't know if you know Edward Deming. So he is an American. During World War II, America was producing a lot of tanks and stuff. They had a lot of problems in terms of quality, and he came along with like another statisticians and basically introduced what you think of as like Six Sigma marketing, or sorry, Six Sigma lean enterprise and all these things. And anyway, after World War II, he tried to sell his ideas to American manufacturers who really weren't interested. Not at all. They thought all problems were essentially the workers. If there's a quality problem, it's because the worker wasn't doing their job right. And he said, well, no, no, no. There's these things around quality, there's statistical measures, there's processes. And anyway, no reception. He now then through a series of strange coincidences, he ended up in Japan, and in Japan, they were rebuilding after World War II. They were known for having shoddy, cheap merchandise, and they knew that they would never compete on the world stage unless they did something about it. Totally receptive to his ideas. And I think you'd probably know the story of what happened to American car companies versus Japanese car companies. And it really wasn't until I think the 80s, there was like a television special about why the US was losing to Japan in terms of manufacturing, that people started adopting his ideas there. And you have all these things like Six Sigma, total quality management, lean enterprise. A lot of this stuff just came out of this idea, and everything is has like almost every retailer has been touched in some way by a lot of these ideas. Now, he wasn't the only person who came up with it or did it, but he really ended up being kind of the father of total quality management. And so, if you enjoy things that don't necessarily break quickly, or any kind of quality in the things you buy, to some degree, you have him to thank for it, for kind of spreading this word and getting around. And he actually didn't make much money off it either until almost, I think he was in his 80s, when he finally started really making money off of it.
So Murray Van Wyck is the Edward Deeming of retail analytics.
I would like to think so, but he's pretty esteemed, so it's a bit of a stretch.
I love it. But
Yeah.
the idea is to create open source technology code that any retailer can use, regardless of size. And then the question will just be receptiveness to using a tool like this.
Yeah, and I think you can expand it even more. Like with you take something like competitor location data.
Mm,
Almost every retailer I've seen says they have it. I think with maybe one exception, it's all been terrible. Like terrible, terrible, terrible. I won't even go into the details. Even just how, like producing tools to help them collect it or use it. There's a whole
mm,
bunch of things. And then I think there's lots of opportunity around processes that can be improved and ideas that can just be copied from other industries. Like software, a lot of the agile software movement, which you might have heard about, that came out of ideas out of manufacturing.
right.
And it also the ideas around quality also came out of manufacturing. So I think it might be retail's kind of Edward Deming moment or their total quality moment or something like this.
And let's touch on data quality, because obviously these tools are only really useful if the inputs are good as well. So you're suggesting that software or open source SaaS can help both with the data collection and cleansing as well as creating outputs from it?
Oh yeah, yeah. There's lots of great open source tools now. I think there's Airbyte, which does a lot of like data transformation and collecting. There's other tools like DBT for transforming data. You don't necessarily have to pay for any of it anymore. You just have to find the right tools. At a certain size, it starts to make sense, though, like a certain size of business, because then your life just gets a little easier. But I think retailers are able to cobble together quite a bit to get data quality up. The only problem is I always say data quality is probably the most unsexy thing about data science, yet one of the most foundational. So
Mm.
it's always a tough sell.
And every retailer loves to say they're data driven and focused on improving through data, but how many actually are, and what are retailers doing if they're not?
I think the real issue is it's unevenly distributed. So you will meet people in businesses, and some people are just so dialed in, and other people it's their pure intuition. And I
Yeah.
think the problem is that there are situations that call for either. Sometimes you just really need to use your intuition because you don't have the data, it's not good enough, or you're not going to get it in time. You just need to make a decision. But then there are other times where you have a hypothesis and it's just super easy to pull some sales numbers and figure out if you're right or you're wrong. But then people don't do it. And it's kind of a question. I often find because a lot of the retailers I end up working with are kind of somewhere in the middle of their data journey. They're bought in, they at least at some level, and they want to start doing it, but they don't have like a team of 50 people to do
Yeah.
all this kind of stuff. And I find a lot of it ends up being finding those people who are really believe in it and are kind of balanced and providing them the tools and the help and the internal support they need to kind of spread that message. In a lot of cases, like it's not unfortunately it's not as simple as like buy this tool, deploy it, get some dashboards and da da da. It's a cultural as much as a technological transformation that businesses have to go through, and culture is never easy. uh,
Yeah, absolutely. How do you win hearts and minds inside a retailer?
Yeah, usually it's I try and find kind of like-minded people, especially people who are who have a good pull or in terms in the business or a good reputation. And then yeah, I just try and support and enable them often. And then you try and you find good wins, and then also help balance the naysayers. Like I had one person who was really adamant there's never ever a need for a churn model. It's all overcomplicated. Any kind of predictive modeling is overcomplicated. I just had a nice chat with them, and I said, yeah, it's true. Sometimes they're completely unnecessary. It depends on where you are in the journey. But in like, he gave me an example. What do you do instead? And I said, well, that won't work for 80% of customers because they
Mm,
just don't have enough data. So what you're really talking about is your churn model is only going to work on the most valuable customers. In this case, those customers had sales reps. It was a B2B business. And
Yep.
I'm like, and they're the ones you're least worried about churning. And so it ended up I was able to like help turn them around. But yeah, it's a real challenge. Finding the right stakeholders, getting management involved, clearing a path, being a reasonable person to debate things with.
Yeah, absolutely. And those really valuable customers where you have lots of data points, having run B2B SaaS business myself, like those regression analyses of why people churn, or the indicators that people churn, are the most valuable, right? And the easiest to access.
Oh yeah, yeah. It comes back to sometimes it's really easy to get some really great analysis. You just have to have the right people involved in it. Yeah.
If you had to kill one sacred cow in retail data, like a metric or a dashboard or a department even, what would you cut?
There's a philosophy sometimes, and not just data, but IT. It's about control.
Mm.
And sometimes I'll deal with IT teams, and they just want to control everything. And I kind of understand it. A lot of cases, they're on the line. If something blows up, they get blamed and all this kind of stuff. But really, IT data, we're here for enablement. Like I provide data. I don't actually at the end make the decision about what goes on the shelf or what doesn't, or the content of the email that gets sent out in terms of like what colors, what brand theme, and all this. Always, 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 I'm about enabling other people to do their jobs better. And when it's the same thing with IT and the wider data, we're all here for enablement. And when we start to think we control it, we know better, there is one right way to do it. That needs to go. It needs to go in a hurry.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you've got to empower people to make changes
Yeah.
and do difference with the data that you're providing
Yeah, yeah. They're like, otherwise, this job doesn't make any sense.
them.
Eh.
Omnichannel is messy, right? So you've got, pure online can be more straightforward, pure retail can be more straightforward, but what's the bridge data between physical and online aspects of retail that often gets ignored?
Well, I always bring it back to transactional data. Huge, like anytime I've built like a model or something, 80-90% of the value of it comes right out of transactional data. And I've
Hmm.
dealt with some businesses that are unable to either bridge online and offline transactional data, or there'll be key aspects about either or that they aren't able to bridge. So it ends up being that, and often transactional data is the best quality because you need it for your tax returns, and businesses
Yeah.
are very, very on the ball about that, and have been for a while.
Yeah.
I usually have a strategy. You start with transactional data, and then you start adding things around that. You definitely don't boil the ocean. And I've seen companies that they go on a huge mission to find every piece of data, or every piece of data needs to be linked. But really, I treat it opportunistically. Whatever you need to identify a customer, or ideally, yeah.
What are the next sources you'd look to after transaction?
Usually, you like email, anything around journey, like online journey, like web analytics are really great stuff as well. But it then starts to end up depending on the retailer. We had one retailer I worked with actually had to get into the parking lot, you had to swipe your card.
Yeah.
And so they could really tell, and into the stores as well. So they could find customers who went in, looked, but never bought anything, which
Hmm.
is hugely valuable.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I've also seen some business have to walking into the shop have the security scanners to see if you shoplifted. Though some of those actually produce counts of the number of people walking in, so you can get an idea again of traffic versus purchases.
Hmm.
Because one of the I would say a key metric that I wish people paid a bit more attention to is I think it's because it's really difficult to track, but what percent of customers actually come in and then buy something or find the thing they're looking for. And it ends up being really difficult because like sometimes you substitute, sometimes you have to do it with a survey, which isn't great. But if you can kind of get to that, like what's missing, I think you can unlock a lot of value. And there's been some academic research into this as well. But this is one of the key questions for retailers, particularly those brick and mortar retailers.
And so that's like physical bounce rate, effectively. On that sort of physical bounce rate, um, What are some things you've seen retailers do to improve that?
Like I'm in the middle of a project that's redistributing the layout of the store to make it much more appealing. So you can imagine you're walking by in a shopping mall and you look into a store and it's just, terrible lighting, terrible flooring, or the all densely packed stuff, or and half dead shelves. You just kind of maybe walk by. So a lot of work goes into really making it appealing. And then there's other work around how much do you put in the shelves, and a lot of this can depend on the type of store you are and your margins. It ends up being a lot of kind of layout and merchandising, like that kind of classic stuff.
Yeah.
But all that stuff is also supported by other things. Like if you don't have a good supply chain, then it's difficult to get the stock to this. And then if you have the wrong stock on the shelves, then it may look nice, but you just don't have things people want to buy. So it is it's tough.
And presumably when you talk about retailers having physical cards or, really good data on their top customers, the 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 best way to do that, or I'm probably saying, I'm open to correction, is some form of loyalty scheme. Would you recommend every retailer have something akin to a loyalty scheme where they collect more data on their best customers?
Definitely not every retailer. I talked to like one retailer which sells like diamond on their average customer comes every several years. Like this is a joke. Like, how many engagement rings do you buy in your lifetime? Two, three, you know? Yeah. So in those cases, definitely no. If you have the kind of customer who you need to win their loyalty to to win in your sector. So like grocery retail is the classic. Like people shop like at least weekly, if not daily in some cases. You need the customer coming as often as possible if you're going to get the volume and the scale to win. And so those are definitely the kinds of cases. In between, it starts to get a really, it starts to be other questions about like kind of the value of loyalty. Is there any chance of you, like I was talking to one loyalty marketer and he was talking about having mission segmentation. So all the different reasons
Mm,
you would visit a store like yours.
mm,
And he was saying he believed that like the end game is to get everybody coming for all those missions. Is that even a possibility in your sector? Like,
right.
it may be that if it's an exclusive brand, you just can't stock it because that brand won't sell to you. They have an exclusive arrangement with your competitor. So you just never can get it. It really depends quite a bit. Yeah.
Okay. So there's some flexibility in which data you want and how you should use it, depending on your your end customer, right? The buying habits that you're
Yeah,
catering to.
and your business goals as well. Some
Mm,
retailers, their goal is just to be the cheapest. Loyalty programs add overhead and cost, so you may not fit with your business goal. Uh,
cool.
I could recommend some loyalty marketers who could probably give you a better answer. Uh,
And retail is seasonal, but you talk about always on data thinking. Why do you focus just as hard on the seasonal troughs as well as peaks?
a lot of cases, you want to keep people coming because you want to be top of mind, mind share. And the other thing is you have fixed costs. You might as well if you might as well try and get every dollar you can or every pound you can to pay off the fixed costs, whether it's storefront, staffing, warehouse, and all these kinds of things. And a lot of retailers, especially the bigger ones, have uh, they're in the maximization mindset. Everything about retail in like the last 100 years has been about scaling. There's been several changes, like when product moved from behind the counter to out in front, that allowed a huge amount of scaling. Then e-commerce online, that allowed an even larger amount of scaling. And so everything's just about scaling. So once you start scaling, you need to start maximizing some of these things. Uh,
But that's a
but
transition from looking just at the top line to the bottom line and maximizing the fixed costs as well.
yeah, but also a lot of these companies are publicly traded companies, so they have to report numbers every quarter, and the numbers need to always go up. So that means focusing as much on the downtimes, the lower quarters, as the high quarters. Uh, I think coming back to things you could kill, the one of the key public company metrics is same store sales or like
Hmm.
for like sales. And
Yep.
so the stores that haven't been upgraded or modified or new or whatever, what were they selling last year and how much did you grow it by a percentage? And some really kooky things can come out of that. Like customers selling entire product lines like that just lose money because they don't want to lose revenue. It's just crazy.
Can you
Uh,
tell me about a time when a customer used an insight you gave them and went all in on it and it still failed? And what that taught you?
none of my insights failed. No.
No, never. Okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, because a lot of the cases, I provide input into a decision. I don't necessarily provide the deciding decision. I know there's been cases where what I've suggested was been highly ignored, which come to mind. Like one company was doing NPS surveys, and they wanted us to show that they were representative of the entire customer base, and we showed that they were most certainly not representative of the entire customer base. But we said we know how to make it representative, and they said thank you, we'll be in touch, and then we never heard from that team again. So
They were happy with the net promoter scores they were receiving, presumably from their most engaged customers.
yeah, well, yeah, exactly. And I think they were worried about what would happen if they actually had a representative sample.
What's a trend in retail data you think's underrated right now?
Uh, it's one of these things. I don't know if it's underrated or overrated, because like to some degree, I think AI is still underhyped, but I think it's overhyped in all the wrong ways and underhyped in the right ways. Uh, because like I started using it, and I have one retailer. I can't, like, I'm not allowed to use it at all for them. Like and another where they're perfectly fine with it. I'm like twice as productive with the one with the retailer where I can. But
Mm.
at the same time, there's like 95% of projects are failing and all this kind of stuff. So I think it's one of these things. I think it's simultaneously under and overhyped. I feel like also data is one of these things. I don't know if there really are trends per se. It just feels like eventually a lag catches up. Like data quality was something I remember saying, we're sending out millions of emails based on this data and we're finding problems with it. We should do something about this, because it could really have big economic impacts, like in terms of unlocking value.
Yeah.
And people are like, well, we'll get somebody to look at it 1 hour a week. And now there's a whole category of tools for data quality and all this kind of stuff. And same things with recommendation engines. Um, yeah, I don't know. A lot of cases, I think it's stuff is catching up to where it should be.
Yeah, it
Uh,
sounds like you're an advocate for the use of AI in unsexy situations, whereas obviously the hype comes from the more
yeah,
big picture sexiest use of AI.
I would love it if people started taking processes, writing them down, and then using AI to kind of evaluate them, even execute them in some cases, or help execute. Uh, I've just seen way too many times where the process is in 15 people's heads spread across 6 departments, and it feels like it's a miracle that anything actually works.
Mm.
And then the solution usually ends up being just buy this piece of software that's a $500,000 a year, and then it'll be all in this piece of software. And I think there is a middle ground that is developing. I think there's a lot of potential, but we're probably, again, like, I feel like every time I say something like this, it's really I'm 5, 10 years early.
Okay,
Uh, so maybe this is a great tip in 5 years. I don't know.
awesome. Oh, anyone listening to this in 5 years, now's the time.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, which I'm reminded will be 2030. What legacy do you want data simply to leave and the way retailers think about data?
Two things. One, introduce a lot of great thinking from other industries like manufacturing and software development into how retailers work. And the second is just taking all the great ideas that are already in retail, that are just some person has a great process, some person has a great idea of way of looking at things, and then just makes that more the standard at which
Yeah.
all retailers operate. Again, I feel like one of the biggest problems with retail is just the lumpiness of excellence.
Huh.
It's not like it's really rare that I see like a retailer is just killing it everywhere. It's usually like this company has an amazing email marketing team, but all their social stuff is garbage,
Yeah.
or their social stuff's great and their email is great, or all marketing is awesome, but they can't get the product on the shelf, or they can always have great products, but nobody knows it exists. It's never everything they're doing is like really at the level where not necessarily excellence, but like best practice. Like best practice isn't uniformly distributed, unfortunately. If somehow I was just able to raise that best practice bar and just make it really easy for retailers that when they're deciding what to sell and what not to sell, as it's as much data as it is intuition, because in a lot of cases it's almost no data, or it's intuition justified that is post hoc justified with data. That kind of difference would be huge.
Nice. Are there some retailers you able to shout out that you feel are doing really well in each of the categories you analyze?
It's a bit tough because like I feel like in a lot of cases it's almost individuals who are doing well and are just really dedicated. Uh, yeah, nothing really pops directly into mind. And the other problem is I think some of those people have moved on in a
Okay,
lot of
cool.
cases.
No worries at all. Well, I'll ask the questions we asked to all of our guests. What
Yeah.
you mentioned how much you like retail. What detail of retail do you like the most?
I'd have to say it's the complexity to it. I feel like at its core, retail is a really simple thing. It's like somebody made something, somebody wants this thing, help them get it, and that, in a nutshell, that's retail. But then you actually look at like what happens when you're online and you have millions of customers or thousands of, like thousands of stores and all this kind of stuff. It just gets really complicated. And it's one of these things I don't think anybody can master every detail of like a retailer at scale, and it just always seems like there's a new puzzle, new challenge, something like that to be explored and dealt with.
Cool. And then conversely, what detail of retail would you most want to change?
I feel like there's probably a couple. One is this obsession with acquisition,
Mm,
and not being balanced with retention. Yeah, it can be blind. I was surprised. One company I worked with, they were in a smaller country, had a niche product, and I think they must have had almost 80% of the market either knew them or used them at some point in the past or was a customer then. And they're still obsessed with acquiring people. And I showed them like in their data, like you're going to run out of people to even acquire at this rate, at the rate of new customers coming into the market and da da da. And they're like, oh yeah, okay, we get your point, but we already told the board that we're doing acquisition and this is our marketing strategy. And it's just like, okay, what can you do? Yeah. But yeah, so that obsession, and then I think the other case is a lot of unnecessary complexity. I guess it's you end up, especially in big retailers, people get these really niche jobs, and they're micro optimizing their jobs. And the result is that you get micro optimizations of like a very large retailer. It just stacks
yeah,
complexity, stacks and
yeah.
stacks and stacks.
And then that
Yeah.
adds silos and fiefdoms and
Oh
like,
yeah, and this well, and so many it's like just trying like I've had to go through the effort of like integrating recommendation systems into retailers' e-commerce systems, and especially like I heard things like, well, you can't offer that product to this person. I'm like, why? Well, it's only available to this customer segment if the order value is over this amount, and they're in the catchment area for this delivery company. And it's just like, well, we can't look all that information up in real time,
right.
and this is one country, and it's like, well, no, you need to deal with my use case. And it's like, okay, but if we went to every country and everything like was like this, you know, we wouldn't recommend anything because the whole thing would just take too long to figure out what we can actually recommend.
Yeah.
So there's lots of that. Yeah.
And it's getting in the way of someone producing something that someone wants.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Which is what it is in a nutshell.
Amazing. What's your most controversial prediction for the future of retail?
I kind of think it comes back to AI. I think there's going to be a lot more AI. Probably not exactly the way people think now, but kind of different. And I also think there'll be fewer people for the same scale
Mm,
of business. One problem I've noticed again is as retailers scale, your job gets too big for you to do. So what do? They put somebody under you, or they split a job into two. And what happens is the retailer scales again. Then you got 4 people, then you got 8, then you got 16 people kind of doing one thing. But I've seen in some cases people are just taking data out of one system, putting it into Excel, taking it out of another system, putting it into Excel, combining the two Excels. Like that's
mm.
not. I can't imagine that's a fulfilling life. You know what I mean?
It's the modern
Like,
modern assembly line.
yeah, well, retailers deserve better. I don't know, like a sub goal, I think, is like really moving people up from tactical work to strategic work. And I am hoping that AI will really allow that to happen because we're already seeing it in like programming.
Yeah.
It's already happening. And I think a lot of things need to change for it to really happen well in retailers. And I think some of that's technological, but and in other parts are cultural.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to happen 5, 10 years, and you're going to see retailers just won't need as many people to get by, or they'll be twice as big with the same number of people.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome.
Or
And
or we'll work
what's
3-day
yeah.
work weeks.
Yeah, well, we've seen a couple of our agencies we've had on the podcast move to 4 days. 3 days will
Yeah.
no doubt follow swiftly. What's your craziest story from working in retail thus far?
I would have to say it's the one that usually gets the most attention is the sheer amount of money that retailers will spend to convince themselves of things. I especially with data science and getting it through. Like one retailer I work with spent an obscene amount of money on a well-known management consultancy to effectively produce a report, which is something you would get out of ChatGPT if you asked how could a retailer use data science to boost their business. Produced a couple of very bad POC projects to show value, and I was like, I could have done that for you for a fraction of that cost, or I could have done it and then taken a 10-year break and just gone on vacation for 10 years. It's just shocking. I don't think I can actually say the amount of money on the air. And then I tell this to people, and the scary thing is some of them don't get shocked. They say, I've seen even more waste.
Ask the amount, but it would keep you happy for at least 10 years.
Yeah, yeah.
Mary Melwick, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jamie. It's been great to.
That's it for today's episode of Retail is Detail. This episode was brought to you by Loxa, the Klarna for insurance, protecting every retail customer everywhere. We support retailers in offering product protection on all major platforms, online and in-store, on all insurable categories. Visit loxacover.com to find out more. You can catch previous episodes on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, or at retailersdetailpodcast.com. I've been your host, Jamie Hamer. Thanks for listening, and see you next Monday.